This presentation demonstrates how the lost tribes of Israel came into Europe and something of their role in Europe. According to the Bible, the 12 tribes of Israel settled in the land of Canaan in the 14th century BC. It came to pass when Israel was strong, says the Bible, that they put the Canaanites to tribute and did not utterly drive them out. The Jewish Encyclopedia states that the Phoenicians were undoubtedly of Canaanite stock. The Canaanites largely were conquered and were intermarried and subjugated by the 12 tribes of Israel. The Israelite cities of Joppa, Dor, Tyre and Sidon were the main trading ports for these Hebrew Canaanite Phoenicians. But why were they called Phoenicians? In her research work, the writer Elsa Marston states, most scholars believe it was the Greek word for purple that gave the Phoenicians their name. In ancient Greek, phoinos meant purple or dark red. In other words, the Greeks called those merchant princes of the Levant something like the purple people. The rich purple dye from the murex snail was traded by the Hebrew Canaanites, who therefore became known as purple people or Phoenicians. Phoenicia, of course, supplied the Israelite King Solomon with ships and navigators for their long voyages. They were expert mariners. According to Collins National Encyclopedia, the Phoenicians founded Carthage, Tyre and Sidon were their principal cities, but they penetrated as far as Cornwall. The Phoenician trade routes are shown on this map. Strabo, the Greek historian, also states that British tin was shipped from Marseille, France. Phoenician coins have been found at numerous sites in Britain. Phoenician inscriptions on the Newton Stone in Aberdeenshire in Scotland. Well, the Hebrew Phoenician Sea People traders, subjugated by the coastal tribes of Israel, they had an early Hebrew alphabet. But in the 8th century BC, according to the Bible and ancient history, most of the 12 tribes were deported to Media by the Assyrians and never rejoined the Jews back in the Holy Land. According to 2 Kings 17, the king of Assyria took Samaria, carried Israel away into Assyria by the river of Gozan and in the city of the Medes. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. Then in 2 Kings 18, in the reign of Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, took the cities of Judah. So the Jewish Encyclopedia says the Israelites who were subjugated by the Assyrian power are certainly in existence. All that has to be done is to discover which people represent them. They must be under a different name. According to the 5th century BC Jewish priest Esdras or Ezra, the 10 tribes migrated as a great multitude across the upper Euphrates. The 6th century BC Jewish scribe Baruch wrote to these tribes which had migrated across the Euphrates, assuring them of redemption. The 1st century AD Jewish historian Josephus records the non-Jewish 10 tribes of Israel beyond the Euphrates as an immense multitude, not to be estimated by numbers. Therefore, the peoples of the Caspian and Black Sea region in the 8th and 7th century BC had lost their Israelite identity. They were known as Cimmerians and Scythians. The Scythians, according to Britannica, migrated from Central Asia to southern Russia in the 8th and 7th centuries BC. The Scythians founded a rich, powerful empire created on the territory of the Cimmerians, who had traditionally controlled the Caucasus and the plains of the north of the Black Sea. The Cimmerians, according to Britannica, assaulted Armenia about 714 BC. In 696-695 conquered Phrygia, Turkey. In 652, after taking Sardis, the capital of Lydia, they reached the summit of their power, but they also invaded Greece. In 1839, Austin Henry Layard found the ruins of the capital city of Assyria, Nineveh, and many, many tablets which have been translated. And the University of Helsinki in Finland has done some of the research there. The earliest references to the Cimmerians and Scythians are on Assyrian clay tablets. One example, tablet number K485 in the British Museum. The Cimmerian king has departed from Mania, that's in Media, and entered Armenia. A further tablet, K11439, British Museum. The Scythian troops, which are in the district of Mania or Media, will move out and go through the passes of Hubuskia, which is in the Caucasus. The Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser in the British Museum records the paying of tribute to Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, by Jehu, king of Israel, who is referred to them by the name Bit-Comri, son of Omri. The Annals of Assyrian King Tiglath-Pileser, also in the British Museum, also refers to the captive Israelites as Comri. In her dissertation on the Cimmerians, Dr. Christensen, Danish linguist, says the Cimmerians were in fact identical with the Israelites deported from the northern Israel after the fall of Samaria in 722 BC. She goes on to say the Israelites deported from Bith-Cumbria of the house of Omri are identical with the Cimmerians of the Assyrian sources. Well, her conclusions. The Bible prophets said that although this calamity will occur, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, "You are not my people," there it will be said, "You are now the sons of the living God." We find from the history of William Camden that the Saxons descended from the Saka, most noble nation out of Scythia. Strabo writeth how these Sakai, as before them the Cimmerians, made invasions into countries that lay far off. The Cimmerians, seeming to be Gauls or Celts under a different name, says the antiquarian Samuel Licence, it is observable that the Welsh, a Celtic people, still call themselves Cymry. Sharon Turner, the Anglo-Saxon historian, says the earliest inhabitants of the north of Europe were the Cimmerians or Cimbri, and at some early period, after they reached the shores of the German Ocean, they crossed it in their rude vessels to Great Britain. The most ancient inhabitants of our island, he goes on to say, were called Cymry. The Welsh, who are their descendants, have always called themselves Cymry. The Cymry of Britain originated from the continental Cimmerians. The Anglo-Saxons, Lowland Scots, Normans, Danes, Norwegians, Swedes, Germans, Dutch, Belgians, Lombards and Franks have all sprung from that great fountain of the human race, which we have distinguished by the terms Scythian, German or Gothic. Now the Apostle Paul in the Bible assumed that the Galatians knew all about Israel's history. He writes to them, saying, Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other a free woman. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. Joseph Barber Lightfoot was English theologian, Bishop of Durham, Canon of St Paul's Cathedral. He wrote up his commentary on the Epistle to the Galatians. In it he says, there is every reason then for believing that the Galatian settlers were genuine Celts. They seem rather to belong to the Cymric, of which the Welsh are the living representatives. Thus, in an age when St Paul preached, a native of Galatia spoke a language essentially the same as that of the Welsh. John O'Hart wrote his Irish pedigrees, the pedigree of the Irish nation. In the 19th century, and in it he says, Greece and all Europe have been peopled by the Cimmerians or Scythians from the borders of the Euxine Sea, which of course is the Black Sea. Jesus on one occasion said to the Jews, "Ye shall seek me and not find me." Then said the Jews among themselves, "Whither will he go, that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Greeks?" So clearly at the time of Christ, these lost tribes were amongst the Greek peoples. In the Apocrypha, first book of Maccabees, we read it is found in writing that the Greeks, Spartans and Jews are brethren, and that they are of the stock of Abraham. Strabo tells us that Danos, having arrived in Argos, made a law that the Greeks should be called Dani. Australian Journal of Biblical Archaeology states that only one of two conclusions can be drawn. Either there were two different tribes, the Danites and the Danai, with an identical name, similar characteristics, which operated in identical geographical regions and period, or there is a link between the tribe of Dan, that's the Israelite tribe of Dan, and the tribe of the Danai. In his Ethnology of Europe, Dr. Latham says, "Neither do I think that the Danai was other than the Israelite tribe of Dan. Only we are so used to confine ourselves to the soil of Palestine in our consideration of the history of the Israelites." According to Britannica, the migrating Dorians settled in the Crimea and along the Black Sea, Sparta, Corinth and Argos. Who were the Dorians? Where did they come from? According to Hannay in his European and other race origins, my theory, he says, regarding the Peloponnese Dorians is that they were a succession of streams of Hebrew fugitives. There was actually in the east a flourishing seaport from which it was at least possible that many of the founders of Hellenic nationality originally issued, namely the town of Dor. The Apostle Paul, again in the New Testament, assumed that the Gentile converts in Greece were familiar with the history of Israel. He quoted numerous Old Testament references in letters to the Greek churches. Here's an example. Writing to the Corinthians, he says, "All our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea." One of 28 quotes from the Old Testament. Then in writing to the Thessalonians, Paul reasoned with them out of the scriptures. Some of them believed, and of the devout Greeks a great multitude, reasoning out of the Hebrew scriptures. There is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, but Christ is all, says St Paul, and in all. Put on therefore as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercy, referring to these people as the elect of God. The Apostle John, in the Revelation, chapters 1 to 3, wrote to the converts in Western Asia, assuming that they knew about Israel's history King David and Jerusalem. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Christian converts in Rome in Italy, assuming their detailed knowledge of Israel's history, quoting some 56 references from the Hebrew Old Testament. Peter in his epistle equates the largely Gentile church with an Old Testament prophecy addressed exclusively to the tribes taken captive into Assyria, the people of God which had not obtained mercy but now have obtained mercy. Tertullian, early Christian theologian, polemicist, moralist, shaped the vocabulary and thought of Western Christianity. He says the most distant regions have received the faith of Christ. He reigns among people in the furthest extremities of Spain and Gaul and Britain, Sarmatians, Dacians, Germans and Scythians in countries and islands scarcely known unto us by name. The 19th century historian John Wilson studied at Trinity College Dublin, produced his lectures Our Israelitish Origin. He says we are to look for the descendants of all Israel, not only among the Germans and their Anglo-Saxon offspring, but also in Italy and especially in France and Switzerland. The Goths, some of whom passed northward into Scandinavia, the Ostrogoths who turned southward into sunny Italy, and the Visigoths in Spain. What about the Etruscans of Italy? An ancient people, says Britannica, whose urban civilization reached its height in the 6th century BC. Features of Etruscan culture were adopted by the Romans. The Etruscans, long before the days of Rome's greatness, Italy was the home of this people far advanced in civilization. The Etruscans, or, as they were known by Herodotus, the Tyrrhenians, who of course named that part of the Mediterranean the Tyrrhenian Sea. In Italy, in the Archaeological Museum of Este, they portray the Etruscan Phoenician alphabet as almost identical to early Hebrew. Etruscan burials are to be found side by side with typical Latin Celtic warrior burials. There was a gradual Celticization of the local population, with Latin objects appearing in Etruscan graves. By the 4th century, the natives had become assimilated to Celtic culture, according to Hayward's study of the Celts and the Etruscans. Iberia? Well, there was an Iberia, the ancient name of the Caucasus, Iberia in Spain. According to the annals of Ireland, the annals of the Four Masters, the Scythians sent colonies to Spain, and it appears that the Iberians, or first inhabitants of Spain, were Celto-Scythians. According to Britannica, France. Celtic tribes known to the Romans as Gauls spread from Central Europe to provide France with a major component of its population. The ancient French, or Gauls, being Celtic. Guizot, in his History of France, says from the 7th to the 4th century BC, a new population spread over Gaul. That's France. They call themselves Kymrians or Kymrians, which recalls the Kimeri or the Cimmerians. Here is a map of the genetic haplogroup Y chromosome DNA classification of Europeans. They're classified as haplogroup R. And it's a migration map showing the movement westwards. Mark Lechner, Senior Technical Editor of the Genibase Tutorials, says the origin of haplogroup R has not been pinpointed, although most evidence leads to a general placement in Central Asia and around Eurasian steppes. This fits equally well in our study. Thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, the east and to the north and the south. One of the prophecies relating to the lost tribes of Israel. British colonies, French colonies. These European peoples were great colonizers. Some German colonies. Portuguese. This was one of the promises to ancient Israel. Spanish colonies. Italian. And Russian. These peoples of Europe fulfilling the promise that they would spread abroad. All European sovereigns, together with the British monarchy, are of common ancestry, all descending from the 17th century Prince of Orange, John William Freethow. This could well be seen as a fulfilment of the promise to Abraham, kings shall come out of thee. Western aid to developing countries. Massive amount of aid going to these developing countries from the people of Europe. In thee and thy seed, another one of the promises, shall all the families of the earth be blessed. But more importantly, the missionary work that was conducted by the European nations, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries, and particularly from Britain, some examples of missionary societies. So we can see in the promises that were made to Jacob, Israel, the patriarch, the lost tribes of Israel are not Jews, they're Gentiles, regathered mainly in Europe, colonising west, east, north and south, with monarchies forming a company of nations and taking the Christian gospel as a blessing to all the families of the earth, just as was promised to their patriarch Jacob.